For the CTM role, it's a role unlike any other. It's not the CRC role. It's not the CRA role. It's not the CTA role. So like you said, Nicole, you really need to get in there and see, is this a good fit for me? Like, what does the CTM really do? Oh, wow. I didn't know that they were on calls almost 50% of the day. Oh, wow. I didn't know they were making decisions for the whole entire study.
Hey podcast listeners, ready to level up your career game? This podcast is brought to you by Granular Level, your ultimate TMF professionals. Need a killer CV? A magnetic LinkedIn profile? Eager to learn the eTMF or expert advice on mock interviews? Don't just dream it, achieve it with Granular Level. Let's craft your success story together. Welcome back to the TMF Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Palmer. Today, we're talking about career paths in clinical research, specifically the clinical research coordinator, clinical trial assistant, clinical research associate, and clinical trial manager. Today, I have an incredible guest joining us, Tiffany Ashton. She got into clinical research right out of high school at the age of 17 and started her career as a clinical research coordinator. Once she gained her experience, she transitioned to a CRA and then to a project manager / CTM role. She has sponsor and biotech pharma experience and has been in the industry for over 20 years. Tiffany is currently the director of operations for ClinEssentials, and she teaches the CTM training course. Tiffany is a well-known speaker and writer. TMF Elite, get ready for an enlightening discussion filled with valuable advice and insights to help you navigate your TMF career in this fast-paced industry. Tiffany, welcome to the TMF Daily Podcast.
Thank you, Nicole. Happy to be here.
We're so glad to have you here. So we have so much to unpack today, and I just want to start from the top.
Okay.
So tell us about what it was like being a CRC and how did you learn the investigator site file?
Yes. Okay. So I actually loved being a CRC because I really liked interacting with the patients, but it was a very, very fast-paced environment. And so my first real introduction to the investigator site file, sometimes it's known as the regulatory binders, was preparing for a monitoring visit. It was my first monitoring visit for a diabetes study I was on. And they said, my mentor was like, you need to make sure everything is in the investigator site file that needs to be prior to the visit. And so what I really did was just take some time one afternoon and just went section by section to really orient myself on what was in here and what needed to be filed, just so when the monitor came in, I would be able to say, oh, yes, it's here, or, we moved it out of this section and put it here. So that was my first real exposure to the investigator site file.
It was paper then, right?
Yes, it was paper. It was definitely paper. Only here recently have I started to see the e-regs, but I would say 18 years of my career, it's been the paper regulatory binder ISF.
So I was listening to a few other podcasts that you've been on, and I want to talk about the clinical trial assistant role, or some companies call it the project specialist.
Yes.
And in one podcast, you made such a great point about how valuable they are on a team and how that role can really expose you to the TMF and other administrative responsibilities.
Yes.
So why is the CTA role important if you want to advance your career?
Yeah, well, you may or may not know, but the CTA role is almost the glue that holds the study together. The CTA is the right hand to the clinical trial manager. So they work very closely with the clinical trial manager to help with agendas, meeting minutes, filing, which would be filing in the TMF, or creating the investigator site file that would actually be shipped to the site, managing supplies, managing accesses, also with some communications to the site. So if you can think about it, that's a lot of the study. They're touching a lot of the study. They are a key component. A lot of times they don't have a big face presence where they're emailing a lot, they're in the background, but that doesn't mean that they're not a very important part of the project. So they're the right hand to the CTM. Then alternatively, they are the right hand or very close helper for the CRAs. So when the CRAs are traveling or they're on site and they say, hey, this new study coordinator needs access to the EDC, they're emailing the CTA and they're getting the access from the CTA. The CTA is facilitating that. When there needs to be binders, supplies, that's the CTA that's triggering them based off of where the site is in the study startup process. So you may not realize, but that CTA is really doing a lot in the background. And because they're working with so many people, they get exposure to the CTM role. So a lot of times the CTAs desire to go to the CTM role. Other times they may desire to go to an in-house CRA role because there are some similarities, but they would just have to bridge the gap with more monitoring, because that's what the in-house CRA typically does, a lot of monitoring, query closure, query issuing in the EDC. But sometimes at some companies, the CTA can even go to the traveling CRA position if they express that they want to do that with their manager. So as you can see, the CTA can kind of pivot multiple ways based off of their experience. Rarely do I see a CTA go back to the site level. I don't really see that. They typically stay within the clinical operations, either within the sponsor or CRO or the biotech or pharmaceutical company. They stay in the operations part and they go either CTA, in-house CRA, or traveling CRA. That's typically the route that the CTA goes.
I think you would agree that if you're in a CTA role, you really want to build that trust with the people that you're working with.
Yeah.
Because the more you build it, the more they're going to delegate.
And
then the more responsibilities you're going to get and get exposed to.
Yeah. So one of the big things as a CTM, and I do contract CTM work here within the last 10 years or so, but what I do, I work very closely with my CTAs and I say, hey, I need you to take care of this. And they let me know, okay, I can do that, no problem. Or I may say, do you need help? Or do you want me to explain how this is done? Or what is your ultimate career goal? I like to ask my CTAs initially when we get together, what's your ultimate career goal? Some of them will say, I want to be a CTM. If I know that, then I'm going to give them more CTM tasks that may be out of the CTA scope, but it's getting them that more exposure. So just like you said, voicing it, interacting with a lot of people, building that trust where the team members know that you are a trusted person and you will deliver, or at least voice that, hey, I have some competing deliveries or deliverables. Can I push this a week? We need that open communication. But yeah, we can't micromanage CTAs. We want to be able to say, here's the work and you let me know if you're having some issues. Right. Come back with once it's done, or, let's meet in a week to talk about your progress.
You make a really good point that it's important to voice I want to be a CTM, if you're a CTA, and to really get your hands wet in there to see, exactly, is this a good fit for me? Because they might say, have this idea of what a CTM does, but until they really shadow or get some of that responsibility, they can make that decision.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's true for the CTM role. It's a role unlike any other. It's not the CRC role. It's not the CRA role. It's not the CTA role. So like you said, Nicole, you really need to get in there and see, is this a good fit for me? What does the CTM really do? Oh, wow. I didn't know that they were on calls almost 50% of the day. Oh, wow. I didn't know they were making decisions for the whole entire study. So there's a lot of things that it doesn't matter. The CTA could say, I want to be a CRA. And then they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know the CRAs have to travel 2 to 3 days out of every week, no questions asked or no pushback. Oh, I didn't realize that. So a lot of times, if you do want to be in whatever role you want to be in, explore that role, because I see a lot of people saying, I want to be there in this role. And then when I break the role down, they're like, oh, I didn't realize the the CRA travel was not based off of your own schedule. When you want to, it's based off of what the sponsor wants and what the CRO wants. Like it's not, okay, I want to just travel once a month. All expenses paid. No, they want you on site 2 to 3 days per week, each week, around 10 to 12, sometimes 8 to 12 days on site, depending on the company. So yeah.
And it's not going to be at a beautiful location every time. You're not on vacation.
You're not. And I could give you a story about that. When I was a CRA, I was assigned to Honolulu, Hawaii. And you could say, oh, Hawaii as your site visit.
You're so lucky.
So lucky. By the sixth visit, I was tired. I was like, I don't want to come back to Hawaii. So sometimes it gets like that. Of course, you have some desirable locations. Other locations are very hard to get to. You have to travel. Then you have to get in the car and drive another hour and a half because it's in a remote part. These are the little nuances that sometimes you don't realize when you're pursuing a role. And so you have to do your research and your deep dive because you would hate to do all there is to get into that role and then get into it and realize, I hate it. I don't like this. So you want to make sure that it's a good fit. I can't stress that enough, especially with our market right now and the jobs, not as abundant as they were a couple years ago. You got to make sure that it's what you really want to do. And it's something that's going to align with you and resonate.
Absolutely. That's gold right there.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're wasting a lot of time.
Exactly. A lot of time. Oh, and then also the CTA role, you do have to realize that is typically an in-office role, or it could be hybrid. So you might have to go in 2 days to the office because remember, you're sending out supplies, you're sending out binders. Typically, they don't send that home with you to send it out from your home office. And if you're doing the filing and the eTMF, or if there's a paper TMF, we're going to have to be on location. So a lot of times the CTA role is either in the office or a hybrid. Rarely are they 100% remote. They were during COVID, but now the expectation is the CTA is going back in the office. So that's another thing, in your research, is this a remote role, an in-office role? CTMs are typically remote. CRAs are typically remote. CTAs are typically hybrid. Only in special occasions can you be fully remote as a CTA too. So these are things, a part of your research that would be helpful to just kind of know as you explore roles.
Let's talk a little bit more about the CRA role.
Yeah.
And being a CRA, collaboration's huge. And from your experience, how did you collaborate with the study teams and the site staff to really facilitate that timely and efficient collection of the TMF docs?
It's all about communication and preparation. Those would be the biggest things. In anything that you're going to do as a CRA, you need to be a good communicator. That means that you need to be up on your emails, keeping your email inbox down. Yeah. And I have a video on our Clin Essentials YouTube channel that shows you conditional formatting, how to format your Outlook inbox, where you can color code. When someone says, "Hi, Nicole," it pops with pink. And so then you can really keep your inbox under control, because if it's not pink, it's not directed to you. So that's a way. But communication, staying on top of your inbox is huge, because a lot of times you'll have information within your inbox and your emails that is critical when you're going to go out on site. So your CTA may be looking at the eTMF and say, "Hey, I see you have an upcoming visit at Dr. Smith's site. Would you be able to collect these 12 documents?" And so a lot of times the CRAs can get direction, if they're working closely from your CTA, of documents that are needed. And then they have to communicate that to their site. It will be best to communicate it beforehand to say, "Hey, Sam, I'm coming in on Tuesday. We need these 12 documents. Would you be able to make a copy or have them available so I can scan them while I'm on site?" So that whole communication flow, knowing what you need to collect and then communicating it beforehand, versus you get on site, Sam's running around in clinic with patients, and now you get distracted by an SAE. you could miss that opportunity as a CRA to collect those documents because just of the hecticness of the day when you get there. So that communication and being prepared is key to collecting what you need for the TMF there.
Say you're working with like a site that's sort of challenging or a little bit hard to work with.
Yeah.
How do you manage getting those TMF docs?
At that time, and I've had that experience before,
We all have.
You need to take the matters into your own hands. And so you're going to have to say, hey, I need the reg binder at the next visit. I need access to the copy machine. And you're going to have to do that. Some sites, you send them a list, they'll make a copy, they'll give it to you. They have it stacked, nice, paper clipped, ready to go. Other sites, you're going to have to take matters into your own hands. And so as a CRA, you have to know your sites, and you have to know maybe the next time I call on site, I need to allow an extra day just to go through this regulatory or ISF versus the TMF spreadsheet. And I'm going to have to make copies, and I'm going to have to deep dive into it. So you have to know your sites, and you have to be flexible and plan accordingly. Don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and help if you know that it's not going to get done. If you just email the study coordinator and they're not actioning it, you have to get in there and collect those documents yourself. Because otherwise the CTA is going to say, hey, where are the documents? And then you have to answer to why the documents weren't collected after you were just on site. So you have to do that. You have to roll up your sleeves.
So I'm the CTA. We'll go with the example you gave.
Yeah.
And I've got those 12 documents.
Mm-hmm.
They're missing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're busy at the site. You didn't have time to review the reg binder.
Yeah.
We hear this all the time in the TMF department because we're just thinking about the TMF docs and nothing else, right?
Nothing else.
And CRA has 1,000 things to do.
Mm-hmm.
So take us through why a CRA might not have time to review that reg binder, or maybe they just reviewed a very small section just to say, like, I looked at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And then I'll come back and tell you what a CTA could do in this situation.
Perfect.
If the CRA couldn't help them. So remind me if I forget.
Okay.
But okay, so when a CRA gets on site, they already know in their head, they probably have a visit to-do list, a little punch list of things that they know they have to do. Their main focus is to ensure patient safety and data integrity, and also to make sure that the study protocol was followed, the procedure manuals that may be a part of the study as well, that the protocol is running as it should be, and that the patients are safe. So since the last visit that the CRA was there, if 4 new patients were enrolled, the CRA is going to focus on those 4 new patients. Were they supposed to be enrolled? Did they meet the inclusion-exclusion criteria? Are they appropriate for the study? That's their focus, because if not, if they don't confirm that, and maybe they come back 6 weeks later and then they realize, oh, shoot, that patient shouldn't have been on the study because they didn't have diabetes type 2. Then we have a bigger issue, because now the patient has been on the study for 6+ weeks taking drug that they shouldn't have. So that is the CRA's focus. That's their main goal. But they have to do other things. They have to look at the regulatory documents and make sure that the regulatory binder is up to speed. They have to check the inventory of the investigational product to make sure that there's enough study drug on site and that it's not expired or it's not looking cloudy when it's supposed to look clear. So they got to check that. They got to make sure that there's enough supplies, patient diaries, glucose monitors, make sure that there's supplies there. They have to potentially, if there's a new study coordinator, train or confirm that the new study coordinator is trained. And don't let there be a SAE, because then everything I just mentioned just goes to the wayside, and we got to focus on the serious adverse event. So as you can see, and remember, you have 8 hours. The CRAs typically have 8 hours on site. They're watching the clock the whole time. They're trying to make sure, my flight leaves at 7. So they're keeping that in the back of their mind. They're trying to coordinate when the principal investigator is going to come in as well, because they have to be able to say, Dr. Smith, I looked at these 4 patients. I've confirmed their eligibility. Everything looks good. So they have to have a report for the PI as well. So all of these things are going on. And if there's anything that goes out of what they expected, the whole day can get derailed. I mean, I've been on site and there was like, we just had a temperature excursion and our IP is, out of compliance now. And we got 7 patients tomorrow. And so then I had to stop everything. And then I had to go and correspond with the IP department to see if we're going to be able to take this IP that was out of range temporarily. They had to clear it. So that took an hour and a half just to deal with that. Then I come back and and then they're like, the doctor's going to be here in 2 hours. So then I'm like, okay, let me see. I got to get something to talk to the doctor. So then I was like, going through eligibility there and reviewing the medical records. And then I was like, okay, spoke to Dr. Smith. I was like, phew. And then they were like, we want to have a little extra training on this assessment. And of course, I'm here. I can't not train. So then I'm like, oh, so you see how the day is just not in my control. And so, yes, regulatory documents are important. I definitely have to sign the monitoring visit log to prove that I was there, but I may not get much else done besides confirming that the IRB approval is current and that we're under the current protocol. And I may be able to check. I want to sign in the log. If there was a new delegation of a new staff, I'm going to check the delegation log. I'm going to make sure that person's CV is there. If it's a sub-I or a PI, well, hopefully not a PI change, because that's another thing. But if it's a new sub-I, make sure the financial disclosure form, make sure the 1572 is updated with the new sub-I in box 6. And then also make sure that their medical license is there and the training log is completed. That's about all I can do in that day of what I'm already dealing with. So that's how it could get where I was on site and I wasn't able to collect those 12 documents. But I mean, since it was 12 documents, I will try to put in a little bit of extra because it's only 12 documents, but sometimes it's 50 documents and I definitely can't get to 50. I can't get to 50 in that day. So that's kind of how it can go on site with a CRA. And so that's why if the CRA is not prepared with their visit to-do list to say, I need to hit boom, 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 they could easily get derailed. And then they get off site and they're like, oh, shoot, I didn't even hit boom, boom, boom. I didn't even touch it. So, that's why the day can just be crazy. So if the CTA connects with the CRA after the visit and says, hey, did you get those 12 documents? They're probably going to say, ooh, Mike, I wasn't able to. And then you're like, what? And then Mike's probably like, what's going on? Why didn't you get these things? Are they just twiddling their thumbs?
I was really counting on you.
Yeah, I was really counting. I'm like, Mike, I only got 3. And then, and then did you know that there was a new sub-I? So there's a new 1572 that I'm going to slide you now. So sometimes that happens. But what Mike can do is, hey, do you mind if I reach out to the study coordinator on your behalf? That's what Mike can do as a CTA. And the CRA is probably going to be like, yeah, go for it. Please take that off my list. And so then they'll say, oh, yeah. Okay. And so Mike can just draft up an email, copy the CRA. So the CRA is in the loop and just say, hi, Sam, can you, when you get a chance or within the next 2 weeks, can you send me these 10 documents for the TMF? Send off an email, check in a week later. That's all. And that's how it could be facilitated. We don't want the CTAs to do that on the regular, but there will be instances where we need some documents to complete a file or complete even a milestone. Like right now we're in the study startup milestone. We only need a couple more things to complete this study startup milestone in the ETMF. We might want to collect those things via email like that. So yes, the CTA can definitely get involved, but just know that the CRA is just doing all kind of crazy stuff out there, and don't let it be bad weather or flights delayed or, you're lost in the fog. I locked my keys in the car one time. I couldn't go to no site because I was like, okay, I had to call AAA. So that derailed my, so it could just be, the CRAs are literally fighting out there for their lives at sometimes.
You guys are like professional firefighters, just putting out them fires. Like, okay, what's the next fire?
Yeah, we are. I mean, like, yeah. And I mean, and it's a great skill to have, but you don't have to be a CRA to still be a CTA or still be a CTM. It's good experience, but you can gather experience in other areas. And as long as you have a coffee chat, hey, tell me about your experience as a CRA, or even research the CRA role. You can understand it even if you've never been in it. And just what I told you right now, that's a good overview of like, oh, I didn't realize that's what the CRAs are dealing with. And remember, this is one site. I got to be on site 8 to 12 days a month. And I have to travel to those other places. So can you imagine doing that times 8 plus writing my reports, doing my expenses, sending out confirmation letters, follow-up letters? I mean, the CRAs, my hat's off to them. I did it. And then after a while, I said, I'm going to have to get off this road because this is not it. Yeah. So, yeah.
And you make a good point. I want to back up a little bit about having the CTAs reach out to the sites to say, hey, you know, the CRA was on site. They didn't have time to get those documents, and it's okay to reach out to the sites, but don't hound them.
Yeah.
This is where you can kind of burn bridges a little bit from a CTA point of view. If you ever need to reach out back to them for another document.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. In any role, as a CTM, same thing. You don't want to burn bridges. If that method is not working, the emails, they're not responding, pick up the phone.
Yes.
Ask the CRA. Do they like text messages? I mean, you never know. Do they like smoke signals? I don't know. You know, like ask them, because some emails, like just think, a CRC is running around in clinic. They're seeing patients sometimes from 8 to 2. And then from 2 to 5, what are they doing? Paperwork and catching up on emails and urgent things, are packing up samples and trying to get them off to FedEx before they cut off to the lab. So they're not just sitting at their desk. Nope. They're not sitting at their desk looking at your email coming through. And if depending on the timing, it could be way down in their list by the time they get to their desk at 3 o'clock. So if the email's not working, that's where you say, hey, to the CRA, do they like text? Do they like phone? What's the best way to get a hold of them? But yeah, you don't want to burn the bridges, because even as a CTM, I've had to call study coordinators and say, hey, there's an interim analysis that just kind of popped up on our radar. Our CRA is going to have to be on site for 3 days. And then I paused and they're like, 3 days. And I was like, please, is there anything that we can do to, you know, like, and then they're like, you know what, Tiffany? Okay. Because we've had a good relationship. I'm not hounding. I'm not like crazy. And so they're like, okay, we'll make an exception for this. But you think that that's going to work if you're a crazy CTM or a CTA or a CRA, those little, that's not going to work. And so you have to realize that you'll probably need them at one point in time to do your job. So you have to always keep that in mind and in the way that you correspond with them.
The tone is huge.
Huge.
And the empathy.
Yeah. And
like, oh, you're busy.
Yeah, we know you're busy. You're in the clinic. You know, like a lot of times during interim analysis, even as a CTM, I'll help the CRAs and I'll reach out to the CRC and say, hey, you have 75 missing pages and, you know, like 50 unanswered queries. How about we do this? Your CRA is going to be on site in 3 weeks. Let's split that up and do 25 pages each week. Do you think that's possible? And then they're like, yeah, okay. And so we get a little commitment and then we're working towards that. I'm not coming in and saying, I need you to do these 75 pages by Monday. They're going to be like, yeah, and hang up, click, a lost reception. So, you know, you have to know who you're dealing with. And that's why it's important to understand the roles. Because if you don't understand the role, then you're just thinking that they're sitting around all day.
Yeah, you think they're waiting on your emails.
Exactly. They're waiting on your request. And remember, as a CRC, I had 5 studies at one time. So 5 sets of teams reaching out to them, you know, 5 sets of patients going 5 different ways and 5 different studies, you know, like, so they have a lot that they're dealing with. So you have to realize that too. So you have to have that empathy and work with them in a certain way that will get your deliverable met and also not tax them as well. So you cannot wait to the last minute. So that's the other thing. Your poor planning is not their emergency.
Exactly.
Exactly. If you know that this site needs to be cleaned up, their ETMF needs to be cleaned up by the end of May, don't wait until May 15th to start reaching out to them, because then you're risking that they can't do it by then. Start now. Take a look. Always prioritize things that if I need to reach out to someone else, I need to give them the maximum amount of time. I can do my stuff in 24 hours or 48 hours, but I can't expect someone else to have to do their work in 24 hours. So give them a couple weeks if you're ahead of the deadline, as far as, today to the end of May.
Exactly. Your emergency is not my emergency.
Yeah, exactly. So these are just ways to work well with the different roles and how everyone is interconnected. Because if the CTA is doing the ETMF and managing the ETMF, they need the CRC and they need the CRA. Those are the two key players that they're going to need. They're also going to need the CTM as well, to make sure that they get them the final plans that the CTMs are creating, the communication plan, monitoring plan, all of those plans need to be final and coming from the CTM as well.
So I've been following you for a few years now, and I know you love that CTM role.
Yes, I love it.
What is it about that CTM role you love?
Well, originally it was because I didn't have to travel anymore. Like I was like, ooh, a way out of this traveling. Okay. But then once I embraced it, I was like, ooh, I like this, because it's not necessarily that I'm in charge of the study, but I am, in a sense. Like I'm the mother hen. I'm in charge of the study, like there. But it's more so of the strategic decisions that you get to make. Sometimes it's trial and error with recruitment. Okay, let's try this, but that didn't work. So let's try this next aspect. But really delivering the study in a quality manner and working with all the different functional departments. So as a CTM, I would be working with DM, I would be working with regulatory, I work with the CTAs, the CRAs, finance. I work with the sponsor if you're on the CRO side, or if you're on the sponsor side, you may have oversight of the CRO. So it just really depends, but I really like interacting with everyone and collaborating to get the study done. So as that CTM, you really get to have your hands in a lot, and you're more so moving things along, facilitating, making sure things stay on track. That's what you do a lot. So like if data management needs to get a data output to, let's just say, the medical writer, because they're in the CSR, the stage of the study, and we need to just have the data available so we can put it in the final study report. I'm making sure those things are happening. Maybe DM, it fell off their radar, and I'm doing a gentle nudge. Are we on track for, Tuesday the 22nd? Yeah, we are. Okay, well, great. And then I'm going back to medical writer and saying, yes, we're on track. Or the medical monitor may be reviewing data listings and say, hey, something's going on here. Can you reach out to the CRA and let's get a call scheduled with the PI? So I'm facilitating that. So you're really facilitating a lot. And I just really like that interaction and being a part of those strategic decisions to make the study a success. And not all studies are a success, but you learn a lot. And I have learned a lot in the role over the last 13 years.
Now, I can tell you're really good at the CTM role by your response. And here's what you said.
What?
Are we on track?
Yes.
Instead of, why aren't we on track? Like, where is this? Why aren't we meeting this deadline?
Exactly. Yep.
Big difference.
It is. Proactive versus reactive. And sometimes this is a learning curve. I wasn't like that when I came in day one, but now I am there now. And so you have to realize, I kind of mentioned it before, if you are going up to the CTM role from a CTA or from a CRA, you've never experienced the things that the CTM has done. Maybe you have overseen it, but you've never really been in it unless your CTM on one of your projects or your project manager on one of the projects delegated you some of the CTM tasks, like writing a project plan, running a meeting for the sponsor and bringing together all of the stats and where the study is. You never done it. So there is a knowledge gap that you have to bridge in order to be successful. So as a part of your research, when you're learning about roles, don't think you're just going to walk into the CTM role and be a stellar CTM day one. That's no, especially if you're coming from a CTA or a CRA role, you've never touched it. You never touch that CTM role the way that you're going to have to run the study.
Is the CTM role the same thing as a project manager, or they're two different?
It depends on the company. The biggest thing that you want to do is read the job description. If you are responsible for the clinical deliverables and running the day-to-day activities of a study, that is a CTM. No matter if it has a project manager title or a study manager title, that is a CTM. The difference between a project manager, you're more client facing, you're more strategic, the point of escalation, you are managing maybe one drug across 5 or 6 different studies. So the portfolio of studies across this drug are for one particular sponsor. That's the difference. And those PMs at that level, they're not involved in the day-to-day. They're not going to call the CRA. They're not talking to the CTA like that. They're not corresponding with the medical monitor. They're the point of escalation. So at some companies, there are PMs. Other companies, it's called a PM, but you're really a CTM. Mm-hmm. And so you have to read the job description, because I have seen people that apply for the PM role thinking it's going to be like the CTM role, and it's a whole different. They're like, I'm client facing, I'm at the escalation point. I'm in different kind of meetings. I'm in like leadership meetings. I want it to be, like in the weeds with the delivering of the study. So you have to be careful there, but they are used interchangeably. But at some companies, there is a separate PM role to the CTM role too.
So there's this sort of misconception that only like the TMF department manages the TMF. But that's not true.
No.
There's like a lot of stakeholders involved.
Yeah. So, everyone, every department.
Exactly. So in the CTM role, like how are they dipping their hands into the TMF?
Yeah. So ultimately, the TMF's responsibility and the success of a TMF is the CTM's role. They're just delegating it out to the CTA. As a CTM, you have to know how your TMF is doing, because if there was ever an audit, a sponsor or FDA audit, it needs to be nearly complete. I mean, it's not one of those things where your study's been going on 2 years and there's 3 documents in the TMF. That's not going to fly. So as a CTM, you have the overarching, because remember, that falls under your preview. Now, you may have an eTMF team or a CTA helping you manage the day-to-day and upload the documents in there. You should be having meetings as a CTM with those teams every 2 weeks, once a month, depending on the stage of the study, to check, hey, how's it going? Which departments don't have their documents, because they can run reports to say, oh, DM is missing this many documents. We expected, 4 annotated CRFs. We only have 2. So they're missing 2. And so we need to identify the departments that are missing their components. Regulatory may be missing something, stats missing. Everyone has a part to play, and the CTM has to have oversight. And then the eTMF teams or the CTA teams will help action getting what's missing into the TMF. So that's how everyone's playing it. Now, there may be at certain companies different nuances. I know that at one company that I was with, they had outsourced the whole eTMF to a company, and that they were just managing the whole TMF for them. But the CTM still had oversight, checking in with them. How are we looking? So the CTM, you cannot get rid of that Then you can't just say, oh, if someone else is doing it, I'm not even going to check, because you're going to be the person that has to answer to it being not in the best position. So you have to keep oversight on that. Even though you may delegate the CTA or the ETMF team to help, you have to continue to have that oversight of it.
So if we're on a sponsor call and the TMF isn't looking great, it's not the CTA's responsibility to be like, well,
no, it's the CTM that has to answer to that. And then, so they're not going to ask the CTA. They're going to say, Tiffany, I see this graph. Why is half of the documents not started or in progress? And we're, almost done with the study. They're coming to me. They're not asking the CTA. And as a good CTM, I'm taking ownership. There's some milestones that are not triggering correctly. We're working on that. Or I just got on the study, but I see that this is a problem area. I'm going to get working on this ASAP. I'm taking ownership in that meeting as a CTM. Then in the background, I'm going to work with the CTA and the ETMF team to say, okay, you saw what happened on that sponsor call. We can't let that happen in the next sponsor call. What can we do? And so I'm going to get the buy-in and help from them to make sure that we get what we need. So the next time we're presenting on TMF stats, it looks good. It's moving in the right direction. So I'm answering to that. That's not something that the CTA is like owning 100%. They're helping, but as a CTM, you own it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can tell just from our conversation, like your soft skills are top notch. Like you just know the right things to say and when to say them.
Yeah.
And like, what type of soft skills do you need to be a CTM?
I mean, you definitely need the flexibility. You need to be flexible. You need to be very agile. Like you got to be moving and you got to be willing to change and pivot at a moment's notice. Good communicator. There's a lot of communication into your internal team. You don't want to tick them off by saying the wrong thing. You don't want to tick off a site by saying the wrong thing externally. Like you just have to be a good communicator all the way around. So flexible, good communicator. Good under pressure. If you crumble like a stack of cards, that is maybe not the role for you, because there is a lot of pressure as the CTM. So you have to be poised, cool, calm, and collected. When you're in the hot seat on those sponsor calls, you can't be throwing your friends under the bus. Your colleagues. You can't just, oh, well, that was the CTA. They just let this ETM. No, you have to take ownership. So all of these things are a part of being really good soft skills or characteristics to have as a CTM. Being able to think outside the box. Okay, this is not working. Let's see, what else could we try? Not just so rigid that you can only go one way, because you have to, every study's different and every project's team is different. So those are some of the skills. Lots of them also cross over to the CRA, as well. So the skills across the board that are needed are, across all the roles pretty much are the same, especially the communication, flexible, team player. That's very important, because you cannot deliver the study by yourself, no matter if you're CRA, CRC, CTA, CTM. No one can do it by themselves, and they're fooling themselves if they think that they can.
Your
and
team will not be audit ready.
Yeah, and you'll be burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, "Has anybody seen Tiffany?" And she's over in the corner, just like, "Oh my God!" But emails alone can run you crazy.
Oh gosh,
need a team. Yeah, you need a team to deliver a study.
So you have become extremely successful in the clinical research industry. Mm-hmm. How do you approach that personal growth and professional development in your career?
I think you always want to kind of have the end in mind of where do you ultimately want to be? And you have to work backwards a lot. So one of the things that I have said here recently, and when I talk to people that are like, I'm new in my career, I say, where do you want to be ultimately? And it goes back to researching, where do you want to be? I want to be in clinical research. Okay, which role? Because the way that you start, depending on your role, you could go the wrong way. You could take the wrong road, or you could take the right road. So here, for instance, if I want to be a CTM, I want to start as a CRC, a CTA, those are my starting points. If I want to be a CRA, another starting point is probably a CRC if I want to be a CRA. You can also try to go the CTA route to be a CRA, but you need to voice it early and loudly and often that you do want to be a CRA, because typically CTAs go to CTM. So you see, if you don't know where you want to go, you could start going down the wrong way. If you're in data management is fine. You can start in data management, but you want to know, where do you want to be ultimately? Hopefully it's like the ultimate goal within data management, like associate director or director. But if you want to get to quality and you start off in data management, there's some similarities because you'll be looking at data and quality, but you just don't want to be too far away from what your ultimate goal is. So it could be a really easy step up. That's one thing, just ultimate goal, and then working backwards. Another one would be networking with the people that you look up to and the roles that you desire. Coffee chats, asking them, following them on LinkedIn, see what they're talking about, what kind of tips that they can share. I share a lot of tips on LinkedIn where if I were to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't have stayed a coordinator for 4 years. I probably could have done it for 2.
Yep.
Or went to CRA sooner. And those are the types of tips like, oh, well, how could you have done it sooner? Because I would have been networking with my CRAs during my monitoring visits about my next move.
Yes.
So there's strategy in networking. You can learn something. I learn something new every day by just talking to people and learning their journey. So it's a lot. There's a lot of information in the knowledge and networking. And then continue to read and know what's going on. You know, I started and there was no e-reg, no e-source. Now there's starting to emerge. I can't be stuck in my ways and say, oh, well, I just don't know about that. Anything, you know, like I have to know, okay, this is the direction that the industry is going for certain companies for certain indications. So you have to keep in the know and read and just continue to expand your knowledge base, and don't think that you know everything, because they say that it could take a person 10 years to really see everything in the industry. And it can take some people longer if they stay at the same company in the same role and they're just always in startup, because then they'll never see maintenance. They'll never see closeout. So you have to also assess, are you seeing the full spectrum right now? Or are you limited where you're at? And do you want to see the full spectrum, or are you okay with where you're at? So some self-awareness is good as well.
Yeah, you made a good point. When you're a CRC, talk to your CRAs, not just to learn about their role, but the company where they're working at. And if it's you'll know if it's a good company, a bad company to stay away from, or if they're hiring.
Exactly.
Always put that little bug in their ear of like, hey, I'm thinking about the CRA role.
Yep, exactly. Because a lot of times the CRAs will be contacted by their manager and say, hey, we're opening up and we will be accepting really strong CRCs for the CRA 1 role. Do you know any? And if you've been talking to your CRAs, and then they could see your good work ethic because you're responsive to their emails, you have all of the regulatory binder ISF ready to go. You know, like if you're a good CRC, then you're going to be top of mind. But if you're a bad CRC, they're not recommending you because their name is on the line of, oh, you recommended this person.
Right.
So yeah, it's a strategy.
What advice would you give to individuals that are considering a career as a CTM, and how can your course help them achieve their goals in the industry?
So one of the biggest things about the CTM role, it's a great role to be in. You know, I think a lot of people, especially CRAs, are interested in it because it gets them off the road. CTMs rarely travel, you know, maybe 10% depending on the stage of the study, more in startup than maintenance and closeout. But the CTMs don't typically travel. So that it's a really good travel balance. And then also the salary is great. You know, it's 6 figures. And as you get more and more experience, you get more and more money in that sense. And then you could also be a contract CTM, which is even better than a salaried CTM. So there's a lot of growth monetarily, and then you can have a lot of work-life balance with the CTM role. So that's one of the things, but it's really good experience to have as you're continuing to grow. If you want to be a manager and have that managerial experience from the CTA, from the CRA, or from even the CRC role, the CTM is a good role to consider. Just do your research and understand what the CTM does, because I don't want you to get surprised. Like, oh, I didn't realize I had to, come up with study timelines and keep the study on track. Yes, that's what the CTM has to do. So just make sure the CTM role is something that you want to do. And then from there, do know, like I said, there is a knowledge gap. You as a CTA or you as a CRA, you cannot just hop into the CTM role and on day one be able to run a study smoothly. If you look at the alphabet A through Z, the CRA may do P through W. They miss this whole chunk of the alphabet that the CTM has to do that they were never exposed to. The CTA may be exposed to more, but more so of they're an observer. They haven't really had to do it. They know that has to be done, but they never even touched it unless their CTM delegated it to them. So again, there's a knowledge gap. And so that's where our clinical trial manager training course comes in, because we teach the CTM responsibilities from study startup all the way through study closeout. And we do practical activities of what a CTM will have to do. We plan an investigators meeting. We write project plans. We review trip reports. We look at data management reports. We do all of these things. So this is what will help you be successful, because you're being trained on the knowledge that the CTM and what the CTM actually has to do and practicing. And so most of our students in our course are senior CRAs, senior CTAs, or even CTAs. They be on the senior level. We even have lead CRCs, and they come in and they get the knowledge, and they're able to express the knowledge in their interviews. So when they say, have you ever planned an investigators meeting? Well, I haven't planned an investigators meeting yet. However, here are the 6 steps that I would take. That's much better interview response than, have you ever planned an investigators meeting? No. And then they're like, okay. You're like, okay.
Now it's awkward silence.
That was awkward silence. So you could see, and we just recently had a CRA that got promoted to the lead CRA position, which at some companies is the CTM1 position, because she took our course and then she was able to demonstrate her knowledge in the interview, even though she hasn't done it yet. She was able to demonstrate enough knowledge that her company said, yes, we'll give you this role. We'll give you the opportunity. That's why the CTM course is so important when you're trying to transition into the role. You get the knowledge. And if you're in the CTM role where you've been promoted or you got there, and if you're struggling, we're helping you not, burn the whole study to the ground, because like we help with, this is the reason why, because a lot of companies, they hire the CTMs, they give no training. It's SOPs, it's system training, and there you go. And
your SOPs are your training.
Exactly. And so if you were a senior CRA, you're like, okay, it says plan an investigators meeting before the first site is activated. That's what your SOP says.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay. And so we break it down in our course where we're saying, okay, you got to start planning an investigators meeting 6 months before the investigators meeting occurs. And this is what you need to do. Think about location, think about timing, boom, boom, boom. We're giving the actionable steps. So a lot of the CTMs that were frailing out there without help, they're being able to thrive and be proactive versus reactive, because they know what they're supposed to be doing since taking the course too. So that's why the course is important. There's not a course out there that you'll get like this. I have graduates that graduated a year ago and they're like, I have a question. I'm like, yeah, go for it. Yeah. And so they have that ongoing support, the lifetime access to course content. They get templates, they get Q&A sessions where I open it up for an hour and they can come in and talk to me. They can do the course in 6 weeks or less, but they can come back and review at any time the course contents. So that's what they get as a part of the CTM training course. And I love it because I love to interact. I love to say, well, you don't want to go down that way. This is my experience, or this is what I've seen. And they're like, ooh, I didn't know that. And so we stop them from pitfalls that they could have run into as a rookie CTM or moving new to the role, because they didn't have an experienced mentor to tell them what's really going on and what that implication could mean. If they do that, here's what's coming behind it. That's what's going to happen.
All right. Where can we learn more about you and everything that you do?
You can follow me on LinkedIn, Tiffany Ashton. I post a lot of good tips. Also to our website. We also have our clinicessentials.com website, where there is a new to clinical research page that will link you to YouTube videos, our intro to clinical research guide. We have blogs that have different topics. And I know we have a blog coming up too on the ETMF. So you have blogs there. So I would really say our clinicessentials.com website has a lot of materials, even our freebie resource library. It's all free. And each month we add an additional resource that you can take if you're a CRA, if you're a CTA, CRC, and really help you with your job, and CTM as well, help you with your job.
Amazing. We'll stick all those links in the show notes. We'll make it super easy for everyone who's tuning in. I enjoyed our conversation so much. I could just feel your energy, your passion, and that you truly want to help people in the clinical research industry. And I love that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole, for the opportunity. Yes. It oozes from me. I wake up and I say, oh, clinical research. I love it. I can hop out of bed and just say clinical research 20 years later, and I'm still loving it. So it's a great industry to be in.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for joining us on the TMF Daily Podcast.
Thank you, Nicole.